Today I am repairing a common electric power steering issue on this 2016 F30 328i XDrive. The issue is not unique to this year or even this model of vehicle. It is across the entire F3X line, so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4 series vehicles. This issue is occurring in our 2016 with just over 95,000 miles. However, it is not yet occurring in our 2017 that has somewhere close to 60,000 miles. Seeing it in one of our F30s, but not in the other. I'm sure in time, once that vehicle gets a few more miles on it, the 2017 will have the same issue. What are we talking about? Well, it is play in the steering wheel. Now, again, this is electric power steering. It's not hydraulic. There is no power steering fluid or anything of that nature. When you move the wheel left to right, you can hear it. If the vehicle was up on a lift, you could hear it and see it, or do a few other things to replicate the issue, but that's effectively it. That's the problem. It's been going on for some time. It's a very straightforward, simple fix. And next up, I will show the materials necessary to perform the repair. Let's talk about the items that are necessary to complete this repair. First up is the electronic power steering rack thrust piece removal tool. It is used to remove not the thrust piece itself, but the cap above the thrust piece. Now, this is inexpensive. It was probably 10 to 15 bucks, something like that. You could probably use a C-clip removal tool like this, or more commonly like this. Something like that or similar would probably do the job, but this was inexpensive. I went ahead and grabbed that. Next up, you will need a repair kit. Now, in the kit are multiple items. First up is the thrust piece itself. Second up is the cap, and I've just got the spring and the nipple laying on top here, but the cap has the 3 holes that line up with the tool there. And you're also going to receive these bands. You will not need these bands. Those are for the dust boots on the steering rack itself, and we're not going to swap those or change those out. I'm not sure why they include those, but they do, and that's fine. I'll just put those aside for another day. And lastly, you're going to need synthetic grease. Now, if you really want to get the BMW FB-1 synthetic grease, you can do that. Just be aware it is hard to get, in that if you order it from a dealer or online, you're looking at a week to week and a half delay. It doesn't come out of BMW's normal parts supply warehouse. It comes out of a chemical warehouse that they have. And that was the feedback that I received from the dealer. It takes more time to get the FB1. You can buy it online. They do not at this time carry it on Amazon. You can get it on eBay and others, but again, it's going to take a little bit of time to get that. Super Lube is the same type of grease as FB1. Also, Liquimoly is another good alternative. And this was about, well, it's $10 online. I think I paid a little bit more locally, but it's something you can find in stores, and it will work just fine. It has all the same properties as FB1. The only thing you could go above this in the Super Lube line would be the high temperature variety. If you want to splurge and spend a little bit more, that's fine. My situation with this repair is I'm planning a 3,000 mile road trip that's coming up rather quickly. I needed to get this done, and I couldn't wait on arrival of the FB1. I also couldn't wait on the arrival of a repair kit from BMW. What you're looking at here is an aftermarket repair kit. This piece is actually aluminum, but it matches identically to the factory piece. So I have no concerns with regard to this being an aftermarket repair kit. And even if it gives me a problem, big deal. This is a very easy job. I can order the part and replace it at a future time, and it'll be minimal effort to do that. These are the items, 1, 2, 3. You're gonna need the tool, the repair kit, the grease, and you can discard the bands. And if you don't want to buy the tool, you can probably use one of these C-clip tools, and it'll work just fine. First up, you will want to remove the forwardmost undercover. That's the cover under the engine. Once you've dropped this down, you'll have clear view of the steering rack, and we can begin the process of the repair. And yes, I have another vehicle parked under the vehicle I'm working on, simply because I'm out of space on the driveway. I have too many vehicles here at one time. So this is the reason I'm doing it this way. But nevertheless, we're only accessing this panel, and that vehicle will not be in the way. The forwardmost undercover is removed, and I lost track of the number of 8mm fasteners, but suffice to say there are many. Let's take a look at the steering rack. Now this is a US spec vehicle, left-hand drive, and the access to the electric power steering thrust piece is right under this cover. First thing you want to do is clean that up. Clean it up really well, everything around it and above it, because you don't want any sediment or anything getting into the steering rack as you're doing this repair. We'll take the next step after cleaning this up. Okay folks, I was able to clear some space on the driveway and get the other vehicle moved out. Let's take a look at where we're at. I have the removal tool on top of the cap here, and that is 24mm. That doesn't mean it's 24mm for you, because this is an aftermarket removal tool, and there are different ones from different suppliers, so who knows if they are the same size, but this one is 24mm. Take note of the hoses here above. I'm trying to get my hand in without obscuring view, but you've got a couple of hoses that are tethered together. You'll want to bungee those or get those up out of the way. I'm going to do that next. But otherwise, they're going to be constantly in your way as you try to remove the cap and, of course, remove the thrust piece itself and install the new one. So you want those hoses up out of your way. But nevertheless, that is a quick checkpoint. I have backed the cap out about 2/3 of the way. I'll go ahead and remove it the rest of the way, and we'll get the rest of this disassembled. Okay folks, let's take a look at what I've done to get those two hoses out of the way. You can see they're connected via a plastic coupler, and I've just inserted a bungee cord in between those and then loop that up top here to the other side to put some tension on that, and that is going to provide all the space we will need to get the rest of this job completed. The original cap, nipple, spring, and thrust piece are now removed. It was very easy. In fact, this pulled out with finger strength. It was no problem whatsoever. Now, in taking a look at the materials, this is a aluminum core. However, the actual contact points here of the thrust piece are nylon or some other type of plastic. I'm not sure, but it's much different than the replacement piece. This is aluminum. Yes, it has some nylon inserts here, but yeah, this is a much different piece. The cap, the spring, and the nipple, they're all the same, but the piece itself is much different. You see there are no sealing rings on this, and this is going to go in under with a little bit of pressure. But I also think it's interesting that there's only this rubber nipple that covers the center of the cap. I find it interesting because it's just this small piece that is really protecting the internals of the rack itself. There's no pressure, positive or negative, on this, but I just found it kind of interesting. So everything else is pretty much the same. Okay, the spring material, that might have been brass or copper, I'm not sure. This is just, it's some type of steel. So anyway, next up is to install the new parts. And what you're going to do with this is coat it in the FB1 BMW Lube or Super Lube or Liquid Moly or whatever you're using for grease. Again, there's no power steering fluid in this electric power steering rack, so there's no concern with contamination. Just use a good synthetic grease. You should be fine. And again, you just want to coat this, go nuts with the grease, and then insert it, and you're off and running. I did put a paper towel in the hole where the old piece came out, just to make sure that that doesn't lead to any dust or anything getting in the system, dirt, grit, whatever. Okay, let's see if we can get a decent view of the inside of the rack now that the thrust piece is removed. And that's about as far as the camera will reach. Maybe a little bit more, but yeah, that's what it looks like. And now I'll go down below, and this is going to be in close. So hopefully that gives folks an idea as to what that looks like when you reinsert the thrust piece. This is what the new thrust piece should look like before installation in the steering rack. It should be covered in synthetic grease. If you watch the BMW TIS animation video on this, they show exactly that. This should be covered on all sides, and you can also fill this spring with grease. It goes on the back side of this, and also apply a thin film of grease to the cap before installing that as well. I don't believe it's possible to overdo it, but you definitely don't want to underdo this part of the process. Grease is inexpensive, and I don't think you can go too far. Make sure that you apply a liberal amount of grease before installing this in the vehicle. The thrust piece is now installed, and it went in on the first try, no issues. I'll also say that I did have to use some force to get it to drop into the steering rack itself. And that's not uncommon, but it was finger strength or hand strength. I didn't have to use any tools, and it went into place. So next is the spring, the cap, the nipple, and then we'll begin the tightening sequence. A quick shot with the spring in place, and I did as I said I would do. It is full of grease. Next up is the cap. Okay folks, the cap is now installed behind the thrust piece, and I will say this was troublesome because I could not get it to torque down properly. It's not cross-threaded. It has been taken apart more than once, and the vehicle has been taken off the lift and driven. The steering has been moved left to right fully in each direction, and it still was fighting me. So this is well beyond the 70 Newton meters of torque recommended by BMW. But there's still a little bit of play in the rack. I'm going to drive it for a little bit and see how things go. I'm going to probably just pull this cap off at some point and put the factory cap back on. It's not going to hurt to do that. There's no wear concerning this part. And you can see the cap is not quite flush with this, this top edge. Is that because the aftermarket piece was taller? Possibly. But yeah, this has been more difficult. Unlike some videos where everything is rosy on projects like this, I will say this did not go as anticipated. As mentioned in the prior segment, I did experience great difficulty with the replacement cap. The thrust piece itself, it's perfectly fine, but the cap had something going on. It would not go into the rack. It fought me all along the way. I have gone back to the factory cap, and as shown, it is seated properly. There's no harm in using the original cap as long as the gasket around the cap is in good condition and the cap itself is not damaged. It looks good, and I didn't have any difficulty putting that back in the rack. Let's take a quick look at the thrust piece cover. This is the aftermarket piece. This is the one that gave me difficulties and really created an issue. Again, the holes in the top are elongated because I applied so much force that this piece would not actually seat into the steering rack. It would not go in far enough. Now, at a glance, I did not understand the issue, but after looking further, now I do. What is the issue? Well, it really comes down to how the gasket is made on the factory piece versus the aftermarket piece. The factory piece is on the vehicle, otherwise I would show these side by side. The way the factory piece is made, the gasket sits in a slot or a groove. It is actually down inside, kind of sits in level with the threads themselves. However, this is the aftermarket piece, and herein lies the issue. The aftermarket piece has the gasket material applied directly to the threads. I'm hoping this is in focus on camera. As you can see, the material is somewhat torn, and that's where it was creating resistance. Now, you could take this aftermarket piece maybe with a pick tool like this or a Dremel tool and kind of clean up some of the excess gasket material. It's not what I chose to do. I chose to use the factory piece. The gasket on the factory piece was still in good condition, and it worked well for me. Beware, if you're going to purchase an aftermarket thrust piece and cover, the cover may be problematic for you, and it all comes down to the difference in design or how they've applied the gasket material to the threads, rather how the factory piece did it with the gasket sitting inside a groove. I want to be clear that I spent a lot of time on this fine-tuning it. I know 70 Newton meters is kind of the baseline measurement for the tightness, but there is some play either way. And if you look at the TIS information from BMW, there are adjustments that can be made, and I've done exactly that. I had the steering where I want it now. There might be just a hair of play, but nothing like before, and I'm very pleased with the result. I'm going to put the vehicle back together and call this complete. I hope this has been helpful.